What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
Guys, we have a great UFC OKC recap coming your way today. We are also going to talk a little RAF because there was some drama. Arman versus Colby Covington. Colby handing Tsarukyan his first loss in RAF. Ben Askren laying the shoes down on the mat, retiring after double lung transplant. We're going to recap all of that and all the exciting action that happened over the weekend. Everything in the timestamps below, so if there's a particular discussion that you're most interested in or fighter that you want to hear about most, you'll know where to find it. But Nick, let's start with the main event.
Let's do it.
Of UFC Oklahoma City, the return of Dricus Du Plessis.
Yes.
And he's calling it DDP 2.0.
Yeah.
And he said, look, the DDP 2.0 is more composed. He's not just going crazy for a finish. I'm taking my time with it. I'm showing that I've made wrestling improvements. In fact, Kamaru Usman had the most success. I guess you could take Sean Strickland off the table, but besides Sean, because Sean actually won, of those that lost to Hamzat recently, Kamaru had arguably the best performance.
Sure.
And a lot of people think that had that gone 5 rounds, Usman may have won the fight. So he said, I wanted to go with a tough task for my first fight back. I wanted a pedigree champion who's also a really good wrestler, who did well against the guy that I didn't do well against,
right,
and show that I'm truly back and I'm better than ever. So I loved that out of Dricus. I loved his mentality going into it. And let's face it, he was the same Dricus of old. He was a little reckless. He was a little wild, but a little bit less so, just a little bit more technical, a little bit less crazy. I liked what I saw. He showed good durability, good cardio. He hung in there in the tough rounds in the middle, 3, 4. Kamaru started to mount a sort of comeback a little bit.
Right.
And Dricus was able to absorb it well and then put the shots back on Kamaru, defended the wrestling well. The fight was a stand-up fight against Usman, which is kind of what he was hoping for. What were your thoughts and takeaways from the fight?
I really enjoyed the fight, and there were so many opportunities where you thought Kamaru Usman was going to go to sleep in this fight, but somehow his durability translates really well to 185. So
tough as nails.
Yeah, I hope that for however many fights Kamaru has left, he stays at 185. We don't need to go back down to 170. I think he would be more susceptible to a knockout if he were to go back down. But if you can take the type of shots he was taking from Dricus and not go out, I mean, he was on wobbly legs multiple times in multiple rounds in that fight. It was almost like Dricus was expecting the referee to step in a time or two because he was so wobbly and, backing up. And the weirdest one, I guess, would be the punch that the knuckle of the thumb wound up going into his eye. He thought it was an eye poke, so he was kind of confused as to why the fight didn't get stopped. And then, he thought he would get 5 minutes, and Dricus was ready to go again. It wasn't an eye poke. It was just one of those weird angles that punches land on. But yeah, I was really impressed with how Dricus kept composure. He kept saying composure was the name of the game. I already know I'm tough. I already know I'm powerful and skilled. Composure. Understanding when I can't get somebody out of there and how to meet them on points. And it's not like he was point fighting Kamaru. Obviously, he was looking for KOs. The beautiful head kicks, really heavy punches. He was throwing an amazing knee. That knee, and he said he worked that knee a lot. I was really impressed with, because Kamaru Usman, sometimes when he throws a jab or he'll throw a strike to the body, he dips down pretty far. And we always talk about the difference between being able to slip all the way down out of the way in boxing versus MMA. You don't have that same luxury in MMA because you have to worry about the legs coming up. And DDP put it on perfect display. Whenever somebody does dip down too low, you have to make them pay with something from the bottom, something that boxers don't have to worry about. That knee was perfectly placed. I can't believe Kamaru Usman stayed up on that. I mean, I think he even landed 2 of them.
That knee was brutal, and Kamaru's knees wobbled, but he stood up stayed up to his credit.
Yeah, Kamaru Usman showed everybody just how much of a dog he is too, because there were multiple times in that fight where he could have fallen down and let Dricus come in, land a couple ground and pound shots, call it a night. You're the former champion. You've done everything in the sport you need to do. You're older in age. We don't need to see any more out of you. All the way till the final bell, Kamaru Usman was trying to take Dricus's head off, and he didn't have success. But at the same time, I just love when two guys can get in there. This is a main event slot. Oklahoma City had waited a decade before a UFC event had come back to their city, and this was a fight night. So you know it wasn't the most stacked card, but Dricus Du Plessis being a former champion and the number 2 guy in the world, and Kamaru Usman being a former champion, one of the best welterweights of all time, one of the best, most dominant champions. They came out and showed what champions are capable of doing in a main event slot. They gave those people 25 minutes of a wild, chaotic, technical, very fun fight. And I feel like Dricus did everything he needs to do to get himself back on the path to a title shot or back to his belt. And Kamaru Usman showed us that even though he's older in age, even though he will likely never touch another title fight in his life, he still belongs in the sport and would be a major problem for a lot of people, even at 185, just based off his performance against DDP. The durability's there. He had a few moments in the fight as well. And I just think Dricus and Kamaru was a perfect match made, and they delivered more than anybody else on a stacked, not a stacked card, but a card that ended up being very entertaining.
Yeah, it was a good on-the-road fight night, and these on-the-road fight nights are actually great. Like the UFC Seattle, that was fantastic, and Oklahoma City is good. I feel like sometimes the numbered cards, like honestly, you have what happened with Conor and Max, that was such a deflating moment, and then the Apex cards, there's good fights on them, but it's a lot of hungry guys.
A bit of filler.
Yeah, it's a bit of filler that takes place. Some of the early prelim and prelim guys are, to call a spade, maybe not UFC caliber, but these on the road fight nights are turning out to be pretty damn good. And we have Abu Dhabi coming up next week. But before we move into what's next for Dricus Du Plessis, because that's what I want to talk about next, because he's in an interesting position.
Sure.
I want to just make one comment to the fact that I think Dricus is one of the hardest strikers to crack the code on in MMA, and that's evidenced by the fact that Trevor Whitman just cracked the code on Ilia Topuria. Right. Justin Gaethje put on a masterclass against who a lot of people thought was the best striker in the game. Dare I even say some people were saying that this may be the best striker that we've ever seen.
Right.
Dricus had every answer for everything that Kamaru was doing. And if you think about it, he did it with Sean Strickland as well in the second fight. I know the first fight was close. Think about all the people, that Israel Adesanya, he was able to stay up on him until he found his finish. The only person that's had success whatsoever against Dricus in the last several years has been Khamzat, but we know the method that he took to win that fight. It was just take him down, rinse and repeat over 25 minutes. But Dricus may be one of the hardest codes to crack on the feet. And a lot of people say, oh, he's unorthodox, he's sloppy. Excuse me, like Trevor Whitman's a genius in this game.
Yeah.
He just figured out Ilia Topuria and had his pupil put on a master class.
Yeah.
He was not able to have his pupil, who's more decorated than Justin Gaethje in Kamaru Usman, able to do anything really against Dricus. I mean, I know Kamaru had a few moments in the fight, but 50-45, Kamaru was pissed about it. It wasn't that outrageous. I had it 49-46. But that was domination.
Yeah, Dricus didn't pull any punches against Kamaru Usman in the octagon, and he also didn't pull any punches to bash Khamzat Chimaev a little bit. He was like, look, this is the type of main event I want to put on for the fans. They pay their hard-earned money. They fill these arenas up, and I don't want to get in the octagon with somebody who's going to lay on top of me and try to win some sort of boring decision. So, yeah, I obviously see he's trying to angle a way to kind of poke jabs and poke some fun at Khamzat Chimaev. But yeah, Dricus Du Plessis, as far as the technical side, it may look ugly, but it is damn effective. And he's got a lot of power. I was shocked that Kamaru was able to eat as many shots as he did. But Dricus just has such a weird timing. And at the end of the day, you got your jabs, you got your straights, you got your hooks and uppercuts. If you're extra talented, you'll be able to throw an overhand. And then, of course, we've got our knees, elbows, and kicks. But you are kind of limited to that. So what you have to do is modify things like your timing and your cadence and your tempo. And he was able to do that really well. And it's not anything new. He didn't change the fighter that he was. They didn't really try to recreate him in these 10 months that he's been off. They just figured out how to keep the composure and understand, like, okay, if I hurt him, let's not just bum rush him and get into a situation where now I'm on my back or now I get cracked with a big shot. Dricus was able to select shots at the right times and do a whole lot of damage. You know, I think the scorecard 50-45 was a little bit tough. It seemed to bother Usman a little bit, but I also didn't really see a clear-cut round for Kamaru Usman. So to pitch a shutout against a former champion, a dominant champion like Kamaru Usman, speaks to how well Dricus was able to bounce back from that loss.
Yeah.
And I think, aside from Khamzat Chimaev being able to hold him down, everybody at 185 is going to have their hands full if they deal with the Dricus that we saw in OKC last night. He's just got the skills. He's got an awkward style, as you said. You can't go find somebody in a local gym that can mimic what Dricus does. You know, sometimes it feels like he's moving his body off to the side in a big way, like he's trending over, or he's just using some footwork to get away from you. But like his arm will stay where he was, and then it throws some sort of weird off-time punch, and it lands with a whole bunch of power. He's also really good at mixing up the shot selection, right? So he'll throw his hands and then he'll start to show you his legs a little bit. And then all of a sudden now he's aiming punches down low and now he's kicking up high. So you really have to pay attention to all aspects of DDP when he's throwing at you. And it's a tough task because of his timing, because of the weird cadence. Sometimes it looks like he's really heavy on his lead leg, which is generally not that great. And some fighters are able to chop the legs and do a lot of damage. But, you know, even though he's falling over forward on some shots, and even though it might not look the prettiest, it is very effective. And yeah, I don't know, aside from Khamzat Chimaev, who's going to be able to beat him at 185.
Yeah, I mean, and is Khamzat even going to be at 185? And that's the perfect segue into what's next, because Dricus is in a unique position, because you can make the argument that Nasruddin Imavov deserves a title fight against Sean Strickland. I think that's pretty undeniable. You can also make a claim that Khamzat Chimaev does deserve a rematch. It was a close fight. Even though I'm not like super bullish on that route for the UFC, you could make that argument. And then you have Dricus, who's got 2 wins over the current champion.
Right.
So what the heck do you do? There's 3 guys, and that would be going into a trilogy with a guy that you've got 2 wins over.
Right.
And the only reason it makes sense, if the roles were reversed, Sean would never get that fight.
Yeah.
But because Sean is the champion, it does make some level of sense. So what the hell do you do with Dricus now?
Yeah, I feel like Sean Strickland should be pining for a fight with Dricus Du Plessis. And whenever we see trilogies in the UFC, it's never one guy who's won 2 fights and then we need to see it a third time.
Rarely. It happens, but it's rare.
Yeah. But this is a unique situation because Sean Strickland has the belt. He has what Dricus wants. And MMA math just has it the way where, you know, he loses the belt to Khamzat. Khamzat loses the belt to Sean Strickland. And then all of a sudden, Sean Strickland winds up back in a situation where he has to face Dricus Du Plessis for a third time. Now, I think Sean Strickland wants to get those wins back. The first one was very close and even controversial to some people. The second one, not as controversial, not as close. But Sean Strickland's the champ. He should have some sort of say in what happens next. I believe he wants to work off merit and give Nasruddin Imavov the right, the shot at the title next. But Nasruddin did something to the UFC which they don't like, and he burned them by telling them he's not interested in a title fight against Khamzat Chimaev. Well, if you tell the UFC you're not ready or not willing to take a title fight, they're going to tell you to take a hot back seat.
Just ask Arman Tsarukyan.
Exactly. Perfect example, and we'll chat more about him later, but Nasruddin might have screwed himself, and he wasn't really thinking, okay, Sean Strickland might win against Khamzat Chimaev, and then that puts me in with Sean. So now the UFC may still make Nasruddin, but if they don't, I think Dricus Du Plessis made himself the clear front runner, because I also don't see a world where Sean Strickland and Khamzat are going to get in there for an immediate rematch. Generally, you have to do a bit more as the champion to garner an immediate rematch. And while it was a close fight, Khamzat and Strickland, it wasn't, you know, something that we have to see again. It was a very technically advanced fight, right? You know, Sean Strickland was able to control it on the feet. He was able to do really well when Khamzat took him to the ground. So I see where a rematch would be fun, but I'm not like of the mindset that we have to see that next. I'd rather see, honestly, a trilogy between Dricus and Sean Strickland, but it would be a weird situation if he goes and steals the belt from Sean Strickland and now Sean has 3 losses against the champion, because then it's like, as long as Dricus is the champ, Sean will never get a rematch. So he'll be in the same position that now that Khamzat's in.
Yeah, Khamzat versus Sean for the second time kind of feels like a bit of a dead end to me, right? Because even if Khamzat does come back and he manages to beat Sean, I don't think he's going to be pining for a trilogy. I think he's going to be pining for a move to 205.
Champ status.
So we're looking at a vacated belt, and then the deck just kind of shuffles. So that's why I do prefer Nasruddin or DDP for the champion over Khamzat. Now, I don't think that – I think the fight to make for Chimaev is Costa. I think Costa versus Chimaev at 205 is the fight to make. Now, is the UFC going to do that? I don't know. But DDP, if they go a different route, I do think we need to see DDP in there again, not because he needs to do anything else to earn another title shot, just because we want to see him a little bit active. He's been off for almost a year. Let's say they book Sean versus Nasruddin or Sean versus Khamzat. That fight takes place sometime in the fall or the winter, and then there's, a recovery from there. Another fight camp. Let's say that, Nasruddin wins a close decision against Sean. Then you're talking about 1-1 and a potential trilogy. And then Dricus's return starts to get pushed back, more and more.
I don't want Dricus on another 10-month layoff.
No, we need to see Dricus in 5 or 6 months maximum.
For sure.
Go home. That was a war. Go take a month, stay out of the gym, heal your wounds, kind of recover, then get back into the gym, spend 3-4 months, really, hopping back into another fight camp, and then you can come back sometime, let's say like January, February, something like that.
Sure.
That's what I'd love to see out of Dricus. So I don't think that if he doesn't get the next title shot, that he should just hold out until he does get it. I could see like a Joe Pyfer versus Dricus, depending on what happens with Joe's next fight. Like throw them into a #1 contenders match. I mean, how fun would that be?
That'd be a crazy fight. Yeah, Joe Pyfer, and they'll be relatively on the same schedule, right? Because Joe's got something booked for the Philly card coming up. So they're going to be, within 30 days of fighting. So they should be relatively close to the same schedule. Whatever card they get put on at the end of this year or beginning of next year, that would be actually a perfect fight. And it really doesn't make sense for him to fight anybody further back in the ranks than about a Joe Pyfer, because he's #2. He just beat Kamaru Usman, who was unranked. So whenever you have somebody coming up, and regardless of Kamaru being a former champion, he was unranked in the division. And Dricus said, no problem. I lost my last fight. I put on a bad showing. The fight in total was a dud. By the way, it was a main event, and I apologize that was the type of show you guys got. And he was really, grateful that Kamaru Usman came out and gave him a real dogfight. But he put it all on the line, because he would have lost if he would have lost to Kamaru Usman. He would have lost to an unranked guy, and being #2, going to essentially out of the rankings, for sure out of the top 5. If he would have lost to Kamaru, that would have screwed his entire trajectory. So I think that DDP needs to be a little bit selective, but I also wouldn't mind seeing him do one more just to stay active. He was in a 5-round war, but he came out relatively unscathed. I'm sure he'll have a few bumps and bruises. It looked like a little bit of damage on his face, but Ilia Topuria is healing up pretty quickly. So I would assume the couple scratches that he got will be gone in about a week or two. So he'll be able to jump back in the mix for sure. And we don't know exactly what the UFC is going to do with Strickland. Are they going to give him Imavov? Are they going to force him to do the Khamzat fight? Khamzat's asking for that to be in the Middle East, which I don't think Sean Strickland's going to take the bait on that whatsoever. But you're kind of looking at a couple of people, a couple of options. And the weirdest thing is nobody's really asking for the Khamzat rematch. Nasruddin Imavov may have, pulled himself out of the runnings for a title fight. And then the other option is another weird anomaly in the fact that Dricus Du Plessis has 2 wins over the champion. So we're talking about a trilogy that really makes no sense as far as traditional trilogies are concerned. But given the fact that Sean has the belt, it makes all the sense in the world, because Dricus wants that belt. So I would love to see Sean versus Dricus again. And if we have to see him fight one more time, it makes sense for it to be another 5-round fight. But I also have a hard time seeing how they would structure that, because DDP feels like a star to me, and he was able to sell out an arena in OKC on a fight night. So are we going to see him on a numbered event next, or is he going to go out there and do some heavy lifting, take care of another traveling fight night, if you will, and do one more just to stay active?
Yeah, and it's weird, just to clarify, Joe Pyfer actually isn't fighting on that Philly card.
What are they thinking?
Yeah, I mean, well, it was supposed to be Bohalio, and then I think there was an injury with Caio. Yeah. Do they just hold that fight together and remake it? I have not seen anything. Maybe one of you guys has a piece of breaking news that I have yet to see that says that Joe Pyfer versus Caio Bohalio is set for a different date, but you could scrap that fight altogether and do DDP versus Pyfer, depending on how schedules work up. I think that is a mega fight.
Yeah, Joe Pyfer versus Dricus Du Plessis would be a lot of fun. And if he's not going to be on the Philly card, maybe sometime at the end of the year, you get those two in there. It could be a feature bout, which would be interesting to see those two guys who are very quickly getting right back into the title conversation in a 3-round atmosphere. We just saw Dricus in 5 rounds, so we understand, usually when you're taking 5-round fights and main event slots, that means you're working yourself right back into title contention. But I don't know if they would main event a fight night again, or if they would be on one of these big cards, say a Madison Square Garden at the end of the year or something like that. But maybe Dricus is down to play ball a little bit and get on that Philly card. I know it's coming up really soon, but
yeah, I don't think so. That'd be a tight turnaround.
It'd be a tight turnaround, but Joe Pyfer needs a dance partner. He needs to be on the Philly card. That's my thing.
Yeah, that does suck that he's not on that card, doesn't it?
And I feel like just because his opponent backed out doesn't mean he should get robbed of that opportunity. But I also understand you can't just throw a rising prospect and top contender like Joe Pyfer in there with whoever. So the schedules do matter. Yeah. Caio Borralho would have been a good option for him, but if he's out and can't compete because of an injury, then you do have to shuffle the deck a little bit and look at what's open and available. Now, Dricus isn't exactly open schedule-wise, but I think he could probably make something happen. But, at the same time, I don't really know what they're going to do. I just think that if Dricus is going to fight again and it's not for a title, it needs to be somebody around the ranking and around the hype level that Joe Pyfer is.
Yeah, I agree. And so let's move into Christian Leroy Duncan now in his performance. And guys, by the way, Nick will address what's next for Kamaru Usman. We're going to focus mainly on the winners today, but Nick does Matchmaker Monday every Monday at 8 p.m. Central, and he talks about what's next and has a potential hypothetical should happen next matchup for each fighter. So come back for that if you want to know his thoughts on Usman and who he should fight next, if anybody, or is it retirement for the Nigerian Nightmare?
Yeah, come hang out.
But now getting into Christian Leroy Duncan, big win over Jared Cannonier last night. Looked good. Probably going to crack the top 10 now. I think Jared was sitting at number 10.
Yeah.
So depending on the meta or the media rankings, he should be 10 or better on both of them.
Sure.
Really good performance last night. Jared Cannonier, 42 years old, lost a step as far as speed, still very strong, good in the clinch. Christian Leroy Duncan showed me a lot of athleticism, a lot of great striking and shot selection from the kickboxing range. I didn't love how every time he rocked Jared, he would just step right into clinch with him. That's kind of, I don't want to say low IQ move, but not ideal move, because Jared's very strong, very powerful from the clinch, and it gave him a second to recover and land some elbows of his own. And I know CLD did throw some spinning back elbows and they landed and stuff, but I feel like had he kept that fight at range a little bit better and not just rushed in every time he had Jared hurt, he may have been able to find a finish, which is the only thing that could have put the seal of like, this guy's a real top prospect on last night's performance, on what was otherwise a really good performance.
Yeah, Christian Leroy Duncan looked amazing. And I think his striking is very interesting at the 185 division. The 185 division has had some of the greatest strikers of all time. Anderson Silva, Israel Adesanya, Alex Pereira. And now, he's on a 5-fight win streak, CLD that is. And I think that we need that kind of skill. We need somebody to represent the high-level striking. He's also like a former basketball player, a professional basketball player. So he's truly one of the most athletic guys on the entire roster. And just the creativity. I love that jump knee. Once Jared Cannonier had his leg and he was trying to walk him to the fence, that quick thought to go, okay, well, what if I just knee him in the face with the one leg that's my current base right now? I think that kind of thought process just is very exciting and entertaining to the fans when you see things you aren't quite expecting. Now, you brought up the clinch, and I just want to say Christian Leroy Duncan had some success in the clinch early in this fight. I think it was round 1. He found some good elbows, some good knee opportunities, and Jared Cannonier, of course, he came from heavyweight, so everybody knows he's one of the strongest middleweights on the roster, but he is kind of hard to control and manipulate in a clinch, and I think CLD even had him in the full tie plum at times, but had a really hard time breaking the posture, and so that's why he was kind of putting himself at risk with Jared Cannonier, who is always dangerous in a close situation. And also, he was able to land some shots of his own in those clinch situations. So while CLD had some good elbows and some good dirty boxing clinch work, Jared Cannonier also had his best moments in those in that same range, in those same situations. So I agree with you. He probably should have stayed on the outside and selected his shots a little bit better. But Jared is also a veteran who knows how to close the distance. And when you get somebody like Jared grabbing you and trying to force you up against the cage, which is largely the game plan for Cannonier, exhaust CLD, make him carry your weight, and hopefully that takes a little bit out of the legs of CLD, make him a little bit slower, a little bit more of a stationary target. Take away the athleticism from the athlete, and you can deal with a much easier task. Now, Jared didn't have the best showing. He's 42 years old. We understand, they're trying to bring up the next generation. And unfortunately for Jared, he's at that point where he's going to be a stepping stone for the next generation. But I think CLD, with that fighting style and his ability to learn quickly on the job, when you go back and watch some of his earlier fights in the UFC, he's making more mistakes and just causing situations and fights to be closer than they need to be. But I saw a lot of growth as far as his ability to mix all the martial arts. There were a couple opportunities where Jared closed the distance and tried to get him to the ground, and he ended up like reversing in a way, and nothing insane. It was nothing like Fatima Klein being able to throw Tabitha Ricci all around the ring, octagon.
Shout out. Great performance last night.
I think she's going to be a champion, but that's a topic for another day. But I just think that he's one of those guys who's an athlete and a visual learner. He's able to see something and make his body do it. And I think that is what separates the best athletes in this sport from the ones who are just good athletes. He's able to, okay, this works for somebody. Let me force my body to do it. I really love the jump knee. I love some of the shot selection. I got to give one shout out too to the kick that he sent. He was hoping that this kick would hit Jared Cannonier, but if it would have landed, it would have knocked Jared Cannonier's head into the nosebleeds because it rattled the entire octagon. He threw this kick, I think it was like a spinning heel kick, and it missed by, a small margin, but it rattled the entire cage. It had DC and everybody on the commentary desk, Michael Bisping, being like, oh my God, he almost knocked one of the fences down of the octagon. Imagine if that would have landed. That would have been like arguably the knockout of the year. So I just love the creativity out of CLD. I can't wait to see what they do next for him. I think a top 10 ranking is appropriate for him. And I think there's also a lot of fun matchups for him to have at 185. And even though we got Khamzat in there, he was just the champion and he's a heavy wrestler, it feels like 185 is kind of full of exciting strikers right now, right? Sean Strickland, pretty exciting champion. Imavov, Dricus, now CLD, Israel Adesanya. So I think CLD versus Israel Adesanya is 100% the fight to make. That is a striker's delight. Israel had his day in the sun, and now it feels like he's sort of passing the torch over to the next generation. But it would be cool to see him in another high-level fight. He got to fight Anderson Silva. He got to fight as a champion and run his division, fought a whole lot of good strikers. He even has the win over Alex Pereira. So the next generation of strikers at 185 would have to be CLD. And I think that him versus Izzy is a very fun fight. Not an easy fight for CLD, but a fight he could win. And getting a former champion like Israel Adesanya under your belt and on your resume is a very good win in his name.
Yeah, you do a big fight night, 5-round main event. Izzy versus CLD. So the people that kind of sit there, just going off memory, I don't have the stats in front of me, obviously. I know it's Fluffy's kind of in that top 5 to 10. Izzy, RoboCop, who has a win over Christian Leroy Duncan. Maybe they go that way.
Yeah, I don't want to see that one again. Aliskerov's in there.
Yeah, Ikram is right there. There's a few more that I'm drawing a blank on, but I think Izzy versus Christian Leroy Duncan will, if the UFC makes that will be the signal that the UFC liked what they saw last night, and they want to try to make this young 30-year-old super athlete a star of the next generation. Yeah. Now, I don't know what his ceiling is. I don't even know that he could beat Izzy, because Izzy's really good from that kickboxing range, really cerebral, and maybe that'll be your match for Matchmaker Monday for Christian Leroy Duncan.
I think it will be.
You're letting one out of the bag at least, but all in all, really good, solid performance from CLD last night. I'm excited to see him develop, because I think he's still kind of raw in some ways, which makes me excited because the ceiling is higher, right?
Yeah.
You get like a Khamzat, and it's like, okay, Khamzat, how much improvement is he going to make between now and the end of his career? Not much. Good news for him is his skills are good enough to have become a champion. But somebody like Christian Leroy Duncan, you could see massive jumps and improvement between fights, which is always exciting when you're watching somebody on the come up.
Yes, CLD was getting the crowd to ooh and ah all night because of the wild techniques he throws. So I think he's must-see TV. He's an exciting middleweight. But the guy who got the biggest pop in the entire arena wasn't the main event. It wasn't the co-main event. It was the guy that started the entire main card.
Tommy Guns.
Tommy McMillen. That guy is a star in the making. So I hope it's okay if we get right into that one.
Please. Yeah.
Tommy McMillen is arguably one of the most exciting fighters, and we've only seen him fight in the UFC now twice. But he lives a certain way, and he fights a perfect way to represent the person that he is.
Yeah.
He's got the Scarface tattoo, right? He just looks exactly like a cage fighter. Sometimes I think people get a little bit confused because we've got the martial arts side of cage fighting, and then we've got just cage fighting. And there's so much respect, and 9 times out of 10, the fighters will shake their hands and they'll hug each other and they'll go dap up the coaches from the other corner. That's not Tommy's MO. He's walking in there immediately, getting in his opponent's face. Like, where was the security? Security wasn't keeping these guys back. It's like they didn't watch the ceremonial weigh-ins and see him get right in Montez's face. And they just let him get right up in his face once they were in the octagon before the fight even started. But I think there's something to this guy. I think he's, maybe he's a little bit raw. Some of his techniques aren't the cleanest, but he's a volume machine. And if he's able to keep putting performances like that on, I think he's going to keep getting bonuses. I think he's going to keep getting good slots on cards. And it's only a matter of time before we see him in there with meaningful contenders and bigger names in the sport. Now, 145 is a very tough division right now. And do I see Tommy becoming a world champion as it sits today? Probably not, but he's in a great gym. Red Hawk Academy, Tim Welch, the former champ, Sugar, one of the biggest stars in the sport. Those guys are brilliant minds in the sport, and they know how to game plan for fighters. They know how to get a guy from being a talented UFC fighter to being a world champion. So I think Tommy's actually got a perfect opportunity to really climb the rankings because, look, at the end of the day, we're talking about the entertainment business. Yeah. Fighting is a sport and sports are entertainment. Tommy is an entertaining guy. He had the crowd going insane from the opening bell to the time he got the fight finished. And I thought, as soon as he came out there and started throwing like 150 strikes in the first round, I'm like, okay, he's for sure going to gas out by round 2 or round 3. And I thought Montez was hoping, and his game plan appeared to me like, okay, I'm going to let him throw his arms out and get tired hitting me so much, and then I'm going to turn it up. That's not the case. Maybe that was the game plan, but Tommy didn't give him an inch to breathe in that octagon. He was just throwing shots. I think the shot selection was really nice because obviously he does most of the work with his hands. He's throwing really good straight punches, but then he slips down to the side. Even that tall figure is able to get down over there to the side, punch the liver, and then he throws these really well-timed knees when you aren't expecting it. He'll start to hit you in the face to make you kind of retreat, put your guard high, and get your head low, and then he has this really nice jump knee. It's sort of a modified jump knee. He's not, getting way up in the air and compromising his balance, but he's just putting it in there at the right time. Beautiful elbows when he needs them. And all in all, he mixes it up to the body and the head really well. I'm a fan. I was talking about must-see television. Tommy McMillen is must-see television. I can't wait for his next fight. He said he felt so good that he could go get into another fight the same night and probably do really good because he was nice and warm from the last fight. So I can't say enough good things. I obviously love the respect of martial arts. I love when you can have two guys that respect each other. But at the end of the day, this is cage fighting. We need to see a little bit of animosity. We need to see conflict followed by conflict resolution. And Tommy McMillen showed us all the aspects of fighting that we love. It's not just the punches and the kicks that matter, but we need to see two guys go out there and settle a beef. And that's exactly what he gave us.
Tommy McMillen is this generation's Diaz brother.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The kids that are just now getting into the sport are going to look at him and his career in that prism, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so likelihood that we ever see Nick or Nate back in the UFC again, very low in my opinion. Maybe you could bring Nate back for Conor, but somebody needs to carry that torch. And I'm with you. Like, I'm all for respect in martial arts and shaking hands and all that, bowing. You have your George St. Pierre's and people like that, Habib, that are revered. But at the same time, there is a market and there is a void to be filled for somebody like a Tommy McMillen, for somebody like a Diaz brother. And I think he fills that perfectly. Now, will he go on to become a champion? I don't know. He strikes really well.
Yeah.
He definitely has some work to do in that regard. But the good news is he's getting rounds in with Suga. And she's a great sparring partner for Suga, because sparring a guy who's maybe a little bit less than you skill-wise, but 1 or 2 weight classes above you is kind of a great place to be, because they can make up for some of the skill disparity with their size and their power and just kind of presence in the cage. And so, you know, in a lot of the build-up videos that I saw him working with Sean, and Sean talking and teaching. And one of the things Tommy needs to do is feint a little more, move his head a little more. But the good news is, who does that better than Sean? And so he's doing that in the cage with Sean under the tutelage of Tim Welch. I think that the ceiling is actually very high for Mr. Tommy Gunn, and I'm excited to see where he goes from here. One more thing on him. We had our friend Moneyball MMA was at the fight in OKC.
Yeah.
And she said that because I heard it on the TV, but sometimes, you know, that can be deceiving.
Right.
I asked her after the show last night, I said, was the pop for Tommy Gunn as big as it sounded? And she said, oh, yeah.
Oh,
Tommy Gunn's a star.
Yeah.
The pop was insane when he walked out.
Yeah, he didn't quite have the Patty the Batty walkout, but I mean, this
Nobody
guy
does at this point, honestly.
Yeah. Is Tommy McMillen the most technical striker in the world? No, but I think that raw aspect of him being a fighter to the core is what is going to keep him winning in the UFC. He's really down for whatever. He's like, he says it, his quote is, "I'll die about this shit."
Yeah.
Like, he truly does not care what the results are. His tongue was full of blood. His mouth, you know, he's got, you know, blood all over him from him and from his opponent. He doesn't care about taking damage. He is truly about this life. And I think that he's going to be one of those guys that can just force somebody into a fight that they don't want to be in. And look, the UFC is full of badasses. There's not an easy fight that you can get in the UFC. Everybody got there from being the best in whatever organization they came from. And now it's just the absolute cream of the crop competing against one another and trying to one-up one another so they can get to the top of the UFC. But Tommy is probably going to be able to bring that pace that we just saw out of him in OKC and bring just the dog out of people. And I think there's a mental aspect of breaking somebody that he's able to exploit. You know, most of the time when you've got respect between camps and respect between everybody, that there's a little bit of like conceding and not pulling punches, not pulling power or anything like that, but a little bit too much respect. He's like, no, this is like, I'm going to treat this like I'm getting in a street fight in Arizona and I'm going to go beat this guy up as much and as often as I can. And the fact that he threw over 500 strikes in just 15 minutes.
Broke a record for 15 minutes, by the way.
Yeah, and you know what? He's going to have some heavy lifting if he wants to beat the all-time featherweight record of strikes, which is held by Max Holloway. But that's only because Max Holloway is in 5-round fights and Tommy's only in 3. So if he can keep that kind of volume up, I have a feeling he's going to outpace most of the guys at featherweight. And I think he can mentally break them with that volume. And the craziest thing about him is, yes, he gets hit, but he does not care about it. He's walking through punches. Like I said, he had some blood on his face as well, but every time Montez was able to land on him, he landed 10 more strikes.
Yeah.
And a wide variety of them, right? He's not really into kicking the legs all that much. He's not really into, you know, anything too technical. He just wants to get out there, put his hands on your face as much and as often as he can. And I think the results speak for themselves. This guy is a star in the making, and I can't wait to see who they give him next.
Well said. So let's move into the RAF stuff.
Perfect.
A couple of big things that happened last night. One, Mr. Arman Tsarukyan suffered his first loss.
Is the generational run over?
I don't think so, because somehow he's still continuing to go up on call sheet for the most likely champion of 155 by the end of the year in the UFC.
Isn't that crazy?
And he hasn't even fought in the UFC in almost a year. I think he's sitting at like 26% chance to become the champion of the UFC before the end of this year, which is wild. Now, he did say, I have a bout agreement signed.
I put
news
pen to
coming up.
paper. Yeah.
So, and then you put that together with Ali Abdelaziz saying that the champion's next fight is against somebody he's never fought before.
Yeah.
Was he talking about Justin? Was he stating the obvious that Islam's fighting Ian Gary? It was kind of cryptic. I think it was perfect. I think it was purposefully cryptic. But Arman Tsarukyan, we have no idea what he's going to do next, but we know it's going to be exciting. However, he did suffer his first blemish on this generational run, but you also have to consider the fact that it came at the hands of Colby Covington,
right,
who's a weight class above him, who in the UFC, I mean, who just beat a former champion, a weight class above him in Chris Weidman, you know, in RAF as well, who's also an All-American wrestler, made his UFC career off of wrestling. So we have to say, yeah, I mean, it was a close 5-3, right? But Arman was initiating a lot of the offense. Colby won the fight very defensively and just kind of reversals and things of that nature. But putting all that aside, Arman Tsarukyan lost his first wrestling match in RAF to an all-American wrestler who built his career off of having good wrestling in the UFC and great cardio and pace, and who was spent his entire career a weight class above where Arman fights. So all in all, not a bad showing and not a horrible way to suffer your first loss.
Yeah, Arman Tsarukyan is just the guy for RAF. He fought last weekend in Tbilisi, Georgia, and then this weekend he fought in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, right? And main evented the show with Colby Covington. And it was just crazy because we had seen him tech fall so many people. He had done so well. And this generational run, I think he's up to like 9 or 10 wins across the board since his last UFC fight. So he's just been consistently competing, whether it's in jiu-jitsu or RAF, which is kind of the home for him now, but he ran into chaos. And look, Colby Covington, he's older in age. He did retire from the UFC, but he is an all-American wrestler. He's a very skilled guy on the mats, and he fought very intelligently against Arman, and that's why he won the fight. You know, wrestling match. Arman is one of those guys who is trying to entertain in all aspects, and I really appreciate him for that. Dana White even came out and said, look, I love what Arman's doing. He's one of the top 5 biggest draws in the sport right now, and what he's doing with Nina Drama is really impressive. I love how she's able to take these guys who have star potential and just show them to the world in a way that the world wasn't familiar with. Arman Tsarukyan's 180 turn with the fans and the world alike is insane. Like, it needs to be studied because everybody hated Arman when he backed out of that Islam fight, and now everybody's demanding that Arman get the next title shot. And largely, it's because of his time on streams and his time competing outside of the UFC. Of course, he had that great win over Dan Hooker, but we're talking about almost a year removed from that.
And it's Dan Hooker. I mean, no disrespect to Dan, but Dan's like maybe a top 10 guy at this point.
Right.
Know?
Yeah, exactly. He's been in too many wars. So Arman is doing everything right as far as the out of the octagon stuff is concerned. And even losing to Colby Covington isn't going to set him back. It has no ramifications on his ranking in the UFC, on his position in the division. So I think that Arman, obviously saying he has put pen to paper and has a bout agreement, makes a lot of sense. I don't think it's against Justin Gaethje, but that makes me think it's either going to be Charles Oliveira for a BMF or Max Holloway. You know, Max didn't really actually get to compete when he fought Conor McGregor. It was just a few seconds into the fight, and then they have to call it. So he's as fresh as the daisy.
And he didn't have to weight cut.
Right. And when you look at the rest of the division, Ilya said he wants to come back this year, but I have a feeling even December is too soon for Ilya to return. But I also just don't think that if Arman just signed a bout agreement, that they're talking about something taking place in December. That's too far removed.
No.
So that gives you, Patty, but Patty's in a really unique position as well. He didn't take any damage, but I don't think that they're going to waste their shot of Patty versus Arman on a non-title fight. So it's kind of leading me towards Max Holloway versus Arman Tsarukyan, and that would likely either be a numbered event feature bout, or it would be a main event for a fight night. But I feel like Arman and Max, given the star power of both of them, are a little bit too big for just a fight night. And that kind of makes me think that it could also be Charles Oliveira for the BMF. Obviously, the internet's kind of talking, and they want to see the Charles Oliveira Arman Tsarukyan rematch, and this time make it 5 rounds, because a lot of people love Charles Oliveira, and they think if it would have gone 10 extra minutes, that he would have beaten Arman Tsarukyan. I don't agree. I think that Arman Tsarukyan would beat Charles Oliveira worse in a rematch than he beat him the first time, even if it is a 5-round fight. But it just makes me wonder. I don't think Justin Gaethje's willing to jump back into the mix this year, and I don't think the UFC is going to say, hey, defend this by the end of 2026, or we're going to put an interim up, or we're going to strip you from your belt. I think Justin Gaethje, after what he did at the White House on the Freedom 250 card, did enough to chill for the rest of this year. Yeah. And that means that Arman Tsarukyan is not getting a title shot next. So it's very interesting. I don't know what direction they're going to go, but hopefully in the coming days or coming weeks, we get some clarity, because 155, went from being the hottest and most star-heavy division that we had to sort of feeling like it was falling apart at the seams to all of a sudden now we've just got it completely molded back together. Justin Gaethje's champion. Arman Tsarukyan's back in the mix. Paddy the Baddy certainly back in the mix. Ilia Topuria is coming back with vengeance. Let's hope he's a humble Topuria, but if not, I'm still along for the ride. Mauricio Rufy is one big win away from getting himself into a title shot. So there's a whole lot of fun stuff taking place, and it's almost like a changing of the guard at 155, but I love this new cast of characters that have emerged as the top contenders.
Yeah, and pepper Diego Lopez in there for good measure. And a lot of people think that he's the one fighting Charles, but no official announcement yet, right? And so I even checked before we started recording just to see, because I keep seeing these posters of Diego and Charles. Now, I know a lot of people make up graphics, but I can't find anything that's credible that's saying that is actually happening.
Wait, could that be the Noche main event?
For sure.
Because they announced a handful of fights last night at OKC. They brought up, okay, we got Brandon Moreno. They listed off a few of the fighters for the Noche card, and they were very clear at saying this is not the main event. Don't worry, we're not putting Brandon Moreno in as the main event. But I feel like Diego Lopez is one of those guys. He represents Brazil and Mexico, right?
Yep.
So Charles Oliveira, obviously he's a Brazilian fighter. They need a title fight for that main event slot, I would assume, but I don't know. Given the rankings right off the top of my head, I don't think there's a Mexican champion sitting right now. So the closest thing would be put Diego Lopez in there for a BMF. Everybody knows Diego Lopez is a BMF, and Charles Oliveira is always down to compete. He was also a 145er a long time ago. So I think stylistically and size-wise, they would match up well with one another, and that could be the direction they go.
Yeah, and then that just brings back the question of what the heck happens with Arman.
Yeah.
And who the heck knows?
Maybe it's Max Holloway.
It might be. I mean, he's even talked about Volk. Would the UFC have any issue passing over Movsar Evloev? I doubt it. I don't think the UFC's like super bullish on him, but I don't think that's what they should do. I think Movsar versus Volk needs to happen. But I'm just proposing that as another alternative.
But it's certainly an option until Movsar starts to put up the social media numbers that Arman's putting up, because everybody knows that the UFC is a business, and at the end of the day, they make good business decisions that are going to make them money. And Arman versus Volkanovski is a way bigger fight than Movsar versus Volk. But I also think that Movsar deserves it. He's the rightful number one contender, and he had the champion co-signing that opinion. So I hope that's not the case, but I wouldn't be surprised. I just assume Arman's return to the UFC's octagon will be at 155.
Agreed. And then, one more thing RAF noteworthy last night was the retirement of Ben Askren.
We want the funk.
Yeah, shout out to Ben Askren.
Yeah,
I mean,
100%.
The guy had a double lung transplant a year ago, and I know he didn't win. Nobody thought he would even be able to ever. Some people didn't think he was going to be able to walk again.
Yeah, well, this was a historic night for RAF, and to see a legend like Ben Askren put his shoes down in the center of the wrestling match.
Was that the first retirement in RAF history? I think it's got to be, right?
It's got to be the first one, and it's so nice that it was Ben Askren. Ben, he was like the first guy they signed, right? They were really excited for Ben Askren to be a competitor in RAF, and of course he had the wildest year imaginable, right? Like, I think it was last night was his birthday, so Chael Sonnen, got on the microphone and made sure the entire arena sang happy birthday to Funky Ben Askren, but he also said a year ago to the day, he asked his nurse, he's like, look, I can't live like this. I don't want to live like this. If this is going to be the state of life that I'm living in, I'd rather not be here. And the nurse was like, no, you're a fighter. You're going to get through this. We're going to get you back to regular life. And whoever his medical team is, I know a lot of it has to do with the individual, and he was able to stay positive, stay optimistic, and stay after it with his recovery. And to go from being in a coma and having a double lung transplant to 1 year later competing on a main event or co-main event, whatever you want to call it. I know they say the first of one of our main events, and they have multiple main events, but he was a main event guy, and he had a main event moment 1 year removed. It was for his birthday. I wish he would have won. Bilal Muhammad didn't need to give anybody else a reason to dislike him, right? Bilal can't do anything without getting all sorts of hate. But at the same time, he's a competitor. He's not going to go out there and just phone it in and let Ben Askren get a win. Like, this is competition at the end of the day, and Ben doesn't need his hand held. He doesn't need to get some sort of fixed result to feel good about himself. It was his birthday.
Showing up
He's
was
alive.
the result for Ben. Yeah,
100%. This fight was never about the points on the scoreboard. It was never about who gets their hand raised. It was about Ben Askren's story from near death. Truly, I think they even said like his heart stopped multiple times, 3 or 4 times. He had actually, died, if you will.
Yeah.
And he's back on the mats. So I'm glad that we're not going to see him do it anymore, because he was huffing and puffing, and that was a 6-minute wrestling match. So I think the new lungs are still getting worked in, but hopefully there's no complications for Ben Askren. I love seeing him healthy. I love that his family was there with him. The entire crowd was going insane. All the little kids that's parents took them out to the RAF event had their shirts off and they're swinging them over their head. It was just a really cool, wholesome moment. And I love Ben Askren. I'm really glad that he's healthy. And Bilal Muhammad also got that win and set himself up perfectly for a match against the guy that beat Arman Tsarukyan, which was the actual main event of the evening. So Colby Covington versus Bilal Muhammad, now taking place at RAF. These guys didn't fabricate any sort of beef. This beef is live and it's real. Bilal Muhammad kicked Colby Covington at the press conference, and that started a whole scuffle, a Zuffa, if you will. And, it sort of ended the press conference. But obviously, RAF is in the wrestling business, but every time they have Colby and Arman, now insert Bilal and Ben Askren, you just have a plethora of viral moments that are coming through these events, and it's going to help Fox Nation. It's going to help RAF grow this sport and get wrestling even more on the main stage. So all in all, it was a home run event for RAF. I'm really happy to see how Ben Askren was able to do. I think the match between Colby and Arman was very interesting. Who knows? Maybe they'll run that back one day. But either way, Arman Tsarukyan's next time out needs to be in the octagon, and I hope we get to see that soon.
Amen to that. Guys, thanks so much for watching this episode. If you haven't clicked that subscribe button yet, please do so. It's a free thing you can do to help out our channel. It costs you nothing, but it really moves the needle for Nick and I. We appreciate it. Come back for Matchmaker Monday, tomorrow night, or whenever you're watching this, Monday, 8 p.m. Central Time live stream. Nick makes all the future matches that he thinks should be made from the UFC OKC card. You don't want to miss it. The chats are going insane in those. It's a lot of fun, and he does a lot of engagement there. So until next time, have a wonderful day. Thanks so much.
Peace.